Oh my god. I was trying to do like a slurp and almost choked. Okay. Welcome back to my channel, you guys. If you think that you've seen this makeup look, this outfit, these earrings, this disheveled hair before, you have. At least I think. Although maybe you haven't, I'm posting that video after this. I'm outfit repeating and makeup repeating. I didn't feel like putting another shirt on, so apologies. But I'm very excited for today's video because today I'm gonna be talking you through all of the eyeshadow palettes that launched this year that I'm glad I didn't buy. I know it's probably hard for anyone to believe that I didn't buy every single palette, but there were some that I skipped. I didn't skip enough is what my bank account is telling me. But we're gonna get into it all today. I feel like I have so many palettes to talk about, and I feel like there's definitely a lot more like recent launches to talk about, and that could be because maybe I was a little way too out of control beginning of the year, and I was like, girl, we need to like reel it in. We've got to stop spending money. Every time I saw this, oh my gosh, I saw this meme. I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it was like basically this girl is saying like when she checks her bank account, she was like trying to put her glasses on and she was like shaking, and I was like, why is that literally me? Like I'll open my like bank account app and I'll be like, what? Anyway, today's video is about the moments that my bank account was spared. So if you are excited or want to hear about the palettes that I'm glad I didn't buy, give me your feedback about palettes that you didn't buy and you are glad about it. Also leave those in the comments below. But if you, I didn't go with my spiel as I normally do. If you like palette themed content or being weird, if you like football, it's football Sunday. The Vikings do play today. We play the Titans. We've got like a frosty purple look on. I feel like it's very, like this is enough for the Vikings, okay? And if Sam Darnold is to throw another pick in the end zone this week, he's canceled. Just kidding. I used to say the same thing about Kirk Cousins, and I was sad when he left. So anyway, if you're excited for today's video, hope you consider subscribing if you haven't already. Let's get into the video. Let's kick it off with me being glad that I have not purchased, like, is that true? No, I definitely did at the beginning of the year. Since the like Part of Your World Oden's Eye collab, I have not purchased an Oden's Eye palette this year, and I am so glad. I was definitely tempted by the most recent holiday launches. In fact, I even messaged Emily from Emily and Max, and she had like posted like, wait, do I need this on one of the palettes, and I replied back and I was like, I know I do, or I was like, I sure do. But then that night I saw Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner, and she's talked about this in the past. She's talked about how something seems different with the Oden's Eye matte formula, and she said the same thing, and I was like, nope, not doing it. I'm not spending my money on an Oden's Eye palette to be disappointed by the mattes again. So I'm so glad. And one thing, like, Annette has done multiple collabs with Oden's Eye, and I just appreciate that she's so honest to say something seems a little bit off with the matte formula now. So if she's saying it, like, I cannot be crazy, and like I'm just not wasting my money on an Oden's Eye palette that I'm gonna be disappointed in. I'm not doing it, and my wallet thanks me. Okay, I put Nomad Space. I can't think of the name of the palette now, but I'll post it over here. I was definitely so tempted to purchase this earlier this year. Nomad Cosmetics kills it with the way that they market and theme their palettes. They always make it so fun that really no matter the color story of the palette launching, it's like fun to play along, guess the destination, and then see ultimately the color story. I was really curious about this one specifically because so many people were talking about the like duochrome or special shade in that palette, but overall the rest of the color story to me just doesn't look like something I would personally get a ton of use out of. And also I've never been the biggest fan of Nomad's formula. Now I will say I recently purchased the Polar one, Polar, and the Chicago Speakeasy, and I will say it does seem like there have been improvements made to the formula, which makes me really excited. But I'm already feeling overwhelmed by the number of palettes that I purchased this year, so I'm glad that this was not another one that's just like sitting in my to be tested bin, because I feel like it would be one of those palettes that I would test and try and then maybe reach for it from time to time for that shade. But for me, Nomad is not up there with like Bella Beauté Bar or Ensley Rain that just has these like phenomenally special shades that I'm gonna be thinking about and like wanting to like tootle over to my makeup collection to grab specifically for those palettes. Like I used the Recently De-Influenced palette again yesterday, even though I finished my testing process, because I love those shadows so much and I was like excited to continue to reach for the palette. I don't feel like it would have been the same with the Nomad. Maybe I'd be wrong. Maybe I would be wrong. Okay, Ensley Rain's Nutty by Nature, or the recent like bunny one. I'm glad they're doing smaller palettes, and I'm glad they're doing these color stories that honestly like appeal to like everyday use. But for me, I love Ensley Rain for the fun, beautiful, colorful color stories and the really shifty shades. And I do like a curated palette from time to time, but I feel like I like a minimum of like 9 shades. So I actually skipped both of those. I don't know, there's something about the color stories of each that just really wasn't speaking to me. And I was like, I could purchase this, but I could also take my $30 and like get Olive Garden or something. So Olive Garden it is, I guess in this case. I actually haven't had Olive Garden recently, but it does sound kind of good. Tacos, but somewhere, let's get tacos, girlfriend. Okay, the Makeup by Mario like newest Etherealized palette. I was not impressed with the original Makeup by Mario palette. I did not feel like those matte shadows like blended together, and I feel like it was Lauren from Lauren May Beauty who said maybe this is one of those palettes that it's literally called Etherealized. Maybe it's not meant to like build up a bunch of shadows and you're just supposed to use like 1 or 2 and then one of the lid toppers. But for me, that's not really the point of an eyeshadow palette, and I want to be able to use the shadows in an eyeshadow palette the way that I want to use the palette. So I was not impressed by that first one. I ended up decluttering that eyeshadow palette, and so it was a pretty easy pass for me to kind of skip over this next one. I thought that the pop of blue was a fun pop. I love blue eyeshadow, but this was a very easy skip for me, just knowing that. Also, like, I love lid toppers. I think they look so beautiful. I always talk about Hope Mess Tom when I talk about lid toppers, because they know how to top their lids in a way that is just so beautiful. But I am not as skilled at topping my lids, and I always am just doing the most with my eyeshadow, whether I like mean to do that or not. So I just don't think this palette is like meant for me, and that's okay. Not every makeup release has to be meant for me. The Glamlight Halloween 2 palette, I wanted this because it's like neutral blue, and I love neutral blue. Then I remembered I still have my Kiss palette from Glamlight, and I was like, this literally though, you guys, in the cart, I was on the checkout, and then I was like, oh, I'm gonna go back and look at the swatches one more time. I will say, I saw a couple really beautiful swatches of some of the blues, but then I really started to like be a little bit critical. I also think it was like spooky time, and I was like, ooh, I wanna like collect another spooky themed eyeshadow palette for my spooky themed palette video. And I was like, wait, why are we buying palettes just to like talk about one extra palette in a collection of spooky themed palettes? Like, is that really where we're at, girlfriend? Get it together. So ultimately I was like, I don't need this. I don't need this. I have plenty of other blues in my collection. I still have a bucket full of eyeshadow palettes. I'm still trying to work my way through before the end of the year to be able to rank. We don't need to be adding another one to the collection. So I'm glad I didn't buy this. I feel like I don't see as much about Glamlight anymore. I am someone who pretty strictly just is on YouTube and Instagram. I don't do the TikTok because I just get sucked in and I just waste too much time. So I just stay far away from TikTok. And I think this is now more of like a TikTok. Like, you find a lot more about them on TikTok. So anyway, I still think this looks like a beautiful palette. I like that there's some neutral browns in there. And if you kind of want to dabble in blues, this might be a way to kind of get the best of both worlds. But for me, not an easy skip, because like I said, I was about to check out, but I'm glad that I skipped it. Okay, the Gourmand Girls Calavera eyeshadow palette. Gourmand Girls is a popular indie eyeshadow brand, or an indie eyeshadow brand I feel like I hear talked a lot about. And so naturally, I'm like, you know, I want to try all the indie brands. And this palette released, and I was like, well, maybe I'll buy this one. But I'm glad that I didn't, because this is a very colorful palette, and I think I would have felt a little bit overwhelmed by this palette. I also feel like this palette did not get the best reviews. I feel like typically Gourmand Girls does, like, people seem to like their palettes, but I feel like this palette specifically, I heard some like more negative reviews, so I was like, okay, maybe this wasn't the palette for me. It all worked out perfectly fine. There are still some palettes from them that still have my attention and I'm interested in potentially picking up in the future, but we're gonna save up a little bit before we do that. And I'm personally glad that I skipped this one. I also just don't love like a larger palette like this, and there looks to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25 shadows. So I didn't need this bit of overwhelmingness in my collection. I do still think these are beautiful, and as I look at the like blue tone palette, I'm like, and I love Diverone, but I do think they have room to improve their mattes. Now, I haven't really listened to reviews about these palettes to hear if the mattes have improved. I was kind of falling into like, ooh, then I would have more Halloween spooky themed palettes to talk about. And then these palettes were relatively expensive, so ultimately I did not buy these. I'm looking at them and I still am like, they still look beautiful, and I'm not saying they won't ever make their way into my collection. Like, if these were to re-release, say, next spooky season, I can't promise you that I wouldn't buy these, but I'm glad that spooky season has come and passed, and I don't see myself purchasing these like right now. Let me know if you bought these though, and let me know if the mattes have improved, or what you thought of the mattes in these palettes. The relaunched, revamped Strange and Unusual palette from Unearthly. I have the original Strange and Unusual, and sorry, not Strange and Unusual, Not Normal. I have the original Not Normal, and for the life of me, could not get myself to use this palette. So tell me why. The moment I saw this, I was in my basket, ready to check out, was like gonna sezzle this one, because you know, sometimes sezzle comes through to break those payments up a little bit. I feel like I was like in the sezzle, like setting that up. It sounds so funny to say sezzle. And then I was like, wait. Like, until I can get myself to complete the original No Pan Left Behind, I cannot justify buying this. Now, do I think the formula of this has probably improved vastly? Yes, but I'm decluttering my Not Normal because I don't care for the color story. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for my the creative juices or lack of juices flowing up in my brain. It doesn't work for that. So I'm so glad that I didn't buy this, because that would have been embarrassing to come tell you guys, like, I can't get myself to use my original Not Normal, so I bought the new one. Okay, the Natasha Jona Roxa palette. And I think this is one of those ones that it wasn't just like I skipped it, but then I'll buy it in the future. I am trying to get myself out of the like sheer collector's mentality where like, even if a color story is not one that I find myself thinking I would ever reach for, I'm still gonna buy it because it's a Natasha Jona midi. No, I don't think I am. Nothing about this palette draws me to it. I don't love purples unless it's more of like a dusty cool tone purple. I don't love like rosy pinks. I feel like I've just recently been talking about like other rosy pink palettes that I'm like, I don't like this because it's rosy pinks. So this palette just wouldn't work for me. I've seen beautiful looks created with this palette, but just that is not my personal aesthetic. I love blues more, I love greens more, I love, you know, warm brown eyeshadow more than what I feel like I personally would get out of the Roxa palette. So I don't need to spend my $70 on this. And I almost bought this on launch day because I was like, oh, gotta catch them all, gotta have them all. Didn't. Almost for sure bought it during Sephora VIB because I was like, well, I can get it on sale. Didn't. And I'm not gonna buy it. I'm not gonna later down the road. I'm not going to. So remember this stuff. I'm not gonna be like, well, I need it. No, girl, you don't. Get the bronze palette before you get the Roxa because you'll use it more. So I'm glad that I haven't bought that. Okay, and then the Too Faced Aptly in Love eyeshadow palette. First of all, this looks really beautiful. And if you are not someone who likes indie eyeshadow, like I could absolutely see why you would buy this. But recently I have started this Armageddon series on my channel that was inspired by Kat and Haley. And I started to go through all of my palette collection, really like think through, am I just keeping this palette for a couple of shades? Can I dupe those shades in other palettes that I want to keep? And I landed on the Too Faced Italian Spritz palette, which I loved testing and trying that palette last year. I had so much fun playing around with it. But when I really started to consider that palette across my entire collection, I was so much less excited to reach for that palette than many of my other indie eyeshadow palettes, because I love indie. I love a punchy shadow on the eye. That is just who I am. So for that reason, I'm very happy that I didn't pick up the Too Faced palette. I still think it looks like a very beautiful palette, and I think this would work for so many people. I've heard a lot of people say, like, if you don't want indie but you do want indie, this is a great palette. It looks so pretty. I also don't reach for reds all that much. I know I recently did a red look and I was like, oh, I need to play around with reds more, but I'm glad that I didn't buy this. I'm glad that I didn't, because I think ultimately I would have had fun testing and trying it, but then I think it would have ended up like the Italian spritz, where I just didn't really reach for it after that. All right, then I have the Colourpop Stranger Things launch. And I feel like this was just like a hyped launch. I don't even watch Stranger Things. My daughter has. Don't come for me as a bad mom because of that. I just, you know, don't. But I was like, ooh, this is a popular launch. I could justify it by saying I was buying it for Zoe. But then really, like, she doesn't play with eyeshadow that much. And she has a whole other collection of eyeshadows she could also be reaching for. And when I told her about the launch, she was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, she didn't care at all. So I was like, why am I going to buy this? Thankfully, I didn't. Even when I, like, pranced into an Ulta, I saw the display and I was like, nope. Walk on by, and I did, and it was fine. So I'm very glad that I did not spend my money on that. All right, the Nars Holiday 2023 palette, I talked myself out of it last year, and then it relaunched this year, and I was like, ooh, is this a sign that I need it? No, girl, it is not. I've talked a lot about I fell in love with the Nars Summer Solstice and have gone on to buy just about every Nars palette since. But the majority of Nars palettes have that rosy undertone or that rosy finish that I am just not a fan of. So I definitely wasted my money on the Nars Checkered palette earlier this year. I will say I did see a teaser of a current holiday palette from Nars that is on their website that's more cool toned and not rosy. And I'm like, we're doing the side eye with that. Maybe I'll get that. But I want to be done doing this collector's thing where I'm like, I love Nars. I need every Nars palette. It's like, girl, you have one Nars palette, you likely have them all, because they really do all look the same. Will I keep collecting the Nars face palette? I even didn't buy the Nars face palette for this holiday. Okay, I was proud of myself for that. I was like, I do not need this one. So we're growing up here. We are growing up. We are saving our money. No, we're not. But I am proud of myself for that. All right, then we have the Makeup Radar and DD Signature, like 5-pan palettes. DD Signature is another indie brand that I was interested in trying, and Makeup Radar is actually who is providing all these photos from their Instagram account. I love the Makeup Radar Instagram account, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll buy these to support. Ultimately, I didn't, and I'm kind of glad I didn't. They're just more colorful, and I think this would be another thing that I would test, try, and then just kind of move on from. Unless it was like a favorite like Bella Beauté bar, but that doesn't seem to be the consensus amongst many people who've tried the majority of indie eyeshadows. Now granted, I could have been an outlier. Maybe DD Signature would become a favorite, and eventually I will try the brand, but I don't think that was my moment to try them, and I'm glad that I skipped that release. All right, the Krypton Cosmetics. These are expensive. These were definitely in cart. These are still beautiful. I definitely do still want to try this brand, but I feel like you would hear about this brand like when these palettes, there's 2 separate launches when they were like launching, and then I didn't hear a thing else. Like I would hear a review here and there, but I haven't heard like a thing else. So, but the first palette they launched, that Color Story, was like right up my alley. I feel like it was like blues and greens, and I was like, oh, but it's expensive. And I just love my Bella Beauté bar and Ensley Rain so much. Like, I just want to make sure like I'll be like buying something that is going to like really live up to kind of like that hype from indie if I'm spending that much. So I'm glad that we didn't spend $70+ on that. Okay, the Beauty Bay Botanical Gardens eyeshadow palette. I definitely want to try Beauty Bay, but I'm like, do I just want to try it because it's like not super expensive, and like you can like be like, oh, you don't have to buy this expensive palette because you can dupe it with this. And I'm like, am I just doing that thing, that YouTuber thing where I'm like, I want to be able to compare the formulas? I think I might be doing that. Like, I don't know if I care that much about Beauty Bay. I don't know that I do. I know people love their palettes. I know people love their palettes, and this Color Story was pretty. But I think I want them to launch like an icy, like fully blue, like icy palette. Like it just needs to be the perfect Color Story, and then I will. And the Botanical Gardens, if I'm remembering correctly, and of course I don't have a picture right in front of me, I think it had like greens, which I love, but I think it also had like rosier like pinks. So I just don't think this is the perfect color story for me to jump in to try Beauty Bay for the first time. And I definitely was doing that thing where I'm like, oh, I'm a YouTuber. I need to try all of the formulas. So that's my excuse for buying. Okay, the Nars Quad. Oh, yeah, the Nars Quad. Looked really beautiful, pretty for travel. I love Nars. I love Nars eyeshadow, but I didn't need this and I'm glad I didn't buy it. That's really what it comes down to. Okay, and then the final thing that I want to talk about is actually from Bella Beauté Bar. So you guys, even though NC Rain and Bella Beauté Bar are my favorite brands, I don't need everything from them. I didn't need the 6-pan palettes from NC Rain, and I did not need the 7-pan like special shades that went with the melted like ice cream collection from them. I actually ended up buying the matte palette, and I'm very happy to have that. But the 7 special shades was like $70, and I know that they have magnetic pans that you can kind of like mix and match. And Angie actually did a cool thing where she like took some of the shades out of the like 7-pan and mixed them with her mattes, and I was like, okay, I could do that, but they were $70, and I was like, girl, you have enough special shades. You have enough special shades. I don't think your life is gonna end if like you're missing these 7. So I didn't buy it, and I don't think I will go back to do so. Like, I really don't think I will. Watch, it's like SpongeBob, like 7 years later. I don't think they'll be 7 years. I don't think they'll still have those in 7 years. I don't know, maybe they will. Anyway, that is gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel. Like I said, I'd love to know what releases, whether they be palettes or just other releases. Let me know what you are glad you skipped. One thing I will, oh my gosh, I forgot to review this in my Sephora review. I'm gonna have to film an extra clip to include in there. One thing I wish I would have skipped is the Patrick Ta duos. If you're on the fence, girl, just don't. Just buy an indie palette. Anyway, would love to know what releases you're glad you skipped in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to support me, as you always do. I love you guys so much. I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.